I don't know. Okay, now it records, but I will miss the beginning. It's okay. We start from here. Share screen. Yes, my protective angels deserted. You remember Anna? She used to be here every day on Zoom. Now that the vacation came, and when there is obviously more time, she is not showing up any longer. She used to tell me, you know, please do not forget to activate maybe someone else could do this for me if you are so kind to just remind me to activate that button. Why is I don't understand. So is the screen? Yes, it's clear, but why can't I? Okay, sorry. So we were talking about this climbing from the valley of the crepuscular valley to the top of the mountain, hopefully of the mountain of the gods, and not the other one. So I'll just show you now some drawings by him oscillating between art and architecture. And he was an anxious man. I think he had visions, but you will see some of his paintings have a certain darkness, if I can say so. Well, the other members of the COBRA movement also had, because he was part of this last avant-garde art movement, and which started, I think, in 1948 and lasted for a few years into the 50s. So it was after the war, immediately after the war. He loved geometry, but he also loved the labyrinth. And so there is some, you see, there are straight lines that they are drawn either with a rectangle or with a T-square or freehand, but in essence is the knot, the anxious knot is the labyrinth. It shows you know, trouble in a way, but it also shows a building site. No, it shows the you know, the skeleton that makes the building come into being. And so it's this aspiration of a builder who was not to build, because he spent many years, actually, I don't know, 15 years or almost 20 for this project, the New Babylon. But you see, the leather does show up almost everywhere, and this I think is connected with what he said, you know, that it's about the realization of life, and the realization of life is also about, or not without also, is about, yes, longing for maybe for a higher state of being in the world, or for the possible, or for the impossible made possible. But essentially, he was a thinker, and but also a doer. So he was a doer who was thinking about not just himself. In fact, I don't think he was thinking too much of himself. He was thinking of the world, of society, of life itself, because he was very unhappy with. I don't think he admired too much capitalism. In fact, he was a Marxist, together with the other members of COBRA. Now, I know that in a country like Romania, the word Marxism is cursed, but in other parts of the world, it is not. And that's because the way it was applied here in Eastern Europe is very questionable and problematic. You see here letters and the labyrinth, and the knot of life, and you know, there is some kind of disorientation, but there is also promise here. It's not a clarity that misleads you. Some paintings. Now, in his paintings, these are usually done around 50s, in the 50s, when he was involved with the COBRA movement. And I will show you also the presentation with about the COBRA movement. He they were very interested in bringing the child forward. In other words, to externalizing the inner child and to return to some kind of innocent primitivism. You see there on the left, kind of a, a window drawn by a child, and then you see faces which are undecided in a way between well, there is also despair here and fear, even angst. But the artists associated with the COBRA movement wanted to yeah, something that other artists wanted as well, to bring to the fore the child. But there is also, as you can see here, you see a house in flames, and you see a frightened, human being, or two frightened human beings. So there is an expressionism here, but there is also some kind of naivete in a way, because of the desire to identify with a child, or to externalize the child within himself, herself, ourselves. In his paintings around this period, but he had kind of three periods. This is from the middle, so-called his middle artistic period, when he was involved with COBRA. And I think he's, I couldn't say this. There are interesting paintings also in his very early works. And from what I read, he initially had a religious upbringing, and then he renounced religion. And but somehow in the end, I think, even if he doesn't use at all recognizable symbols of religion, implicitly I felt that he was not a man uninterested in the spiritual side of life at all. Anyway, other paintings from that period, you see animals, you see strange birds, and you see this conglomerate of dark figures in a way. And he paints kind of like Asger Jorn, the great Danish painter, who was also a part of the COBRA movement, and for whom John Utzon was supposed to build a museum, but unfortunately Asger Jorn died approximately young, so that museum was not built. But the project, to an extent, was already sketched by John Utzon, the author of the opera in Sydney, of course, who was also Danish. So these are paintings by Constant. You see 1949. Now you see there is darkness here. There is a strange animal figure, there is something almost a little bit demonic. There is the world of the dream, but very differently externalized in comparison with the surrealists. In fact, the COBRA movement was against the surrealists. This was also from 1949. Strange animals, and it doesn't seem to me in these paintings a very happy man. He also loved gypsies music. And if you read on the Wikipedia, he had, and in a way, his New Babylon is about nomadic life. This was his idea, that will not be pinned down to a domesticity that is not truly is not truly our nature in a way, and that in quest for freedom, we should become, in fact, he was even against the idea of a family. So no family, no fixed abode, but, fluctuating through life, changing locations, and the New Babylon was about this. Anyway. another, curious painting. There was, I think there was also, I mean, the war ended just 4 years earlier. And the Netherlands did suffer because of the war. I mean, let's recall Rotterdam was almost flattened in its entirety. I mean, the whole historical center or all center was flattened by the bombs. But you can already acknowledge his connection, his affinity with the drawings of children. I mean, there are children who draw very similarly to what we see here. Look at the airplanes, look at the sun. Look at. I mean, you could say this is a child's drawing. Well, it's the drawing of a or the painting of an educated and sophisticated artist. This painting is called Homo Ludens, and well, the Dutch in general, but him in particular, was very affected or very influenced by the book of Johann Huizinga, Homo Ludens, the playing man, and the New Babylon, the architectural project, and we'll look at some images about it next, was supposed to be for exactly that Homo Ludens, the playing human being who doesn't have any longer to wash dishes because there will be some machine that will wash dishes and will not have to go to work because the robots will go to work. I mean, of course it was a dream. And I'm not even sure if it was a dream totally beneficial in a way, because I don't know. I don't know. I mean, all my life I searched for freedom, but strangely, when you have it, you kind of long for the other side. Like Fernando Pessoa said, it must be beautiful in Australia as long as you don't go there. So maybe it must be beautiful to have total freedom, no family, no house, to just be a wanderer. But, when you are a wanderer, when you finally become a wanderer, you realize that maybe it wasn't so bad when you had a family and, an address and so on. By the way of this, I read a long time ago a book by a psychoanalyst, a woman psychoanalyst in the United States, about the 4 ages of a man, of a human being in life. She said like this: when we are born, we are orphans. That was his idea, that we are all orphans when we are born, because yes, we have parents, most of us, but because of the differences in, I mean, not exactly when you are born, but even then, why is the baby crying when he emerges into the world? Because the baby feels the uncomfortableness in a way of the world, and also by being rejected in a way, by being brought into the world, leaves the parent, and that creates already a drama. And so there is some kind of, because of the difference, and that's why many people have problems with their children, the children with the parents with the children, because there are differences. It's a different generation. And so in a sense, maybe she was right. Let's say we are born orphans. But then she said at 18, around 18, we become martyrs and heroes because we want to change the world. Well, not I don't see this too much at the university here, but usually young people, teenagers, very young adults, yeah, they are unhappy with the world. They want to change the world, and like Oscar Wilde said, I'm not so young to believe I know everything. So the young usually believe that they know everything and they want to change the world. But you know, after a while, they realize that it's impossible because it's not possible. You want to change the world, but the world doesn't allow itself to be changed by you. So, you know, you keep trying and you keep failing. And then around 40, she said, totally disappointed and disheartened, you become a wanderer because you don't have a center any longer. You don't believe any longer in yourself. You don't believe in your ideal. You don't believe that your heroic stance will bring any fruits, and your martyrdom feels useless. So you become a wanderer. And if you survive that wandering through the world, decentered and broken in a way, if you survive that third stage, you become a magician, she said, because the magician is the one who handles several balls at the same time and is able to negotiate with life, both in his terms and in the terms of society. So this Homo ludens apparently some kind of a magician, no, who he is maybe still a wanderer, but is able to arrive at that magnificent way of being in the world, playing with the world and being creative and being childlike and joyous and so on. Now let's see some images from the New Babylon. So the New Babylon, the name was not given by him, but one of his collaborators. He was, I think, was Guy Debord, the great situationist. He was involved with various art movements. Two of them, the most important, COBRA and the Situationist International. And I truly suggest to you, if you have an interest in you know, revolutionary ideas and the newest avant-garde, to open up at least Wikipedia and read about COBRA, COBRA, and the Situationist movement, where Guy Debord was the chief, so to speak, and he was involved too. And anyway, there was an interesting group of people there who wanted to transform society and themselves, or themselves and society, according to new desiderata or new vision. Now, again, we see drawings that are, you know, labyrinthical, and he tried to, I mean, he was not trained as an architect, but he had great interest in architecture and urbanism, if I call it so, and he wanted to envision a new kind of life, not with a home sweet home, that idealized and idyllic and bucolic little house, you know, the cookie or the, I don't know, the gingerbread house. No, quite the opposite. He wanted to free human beings and to achieve their highest potential. And he thought that the highest potential of human beings can only be achieved out of confines, out of you know, limitations that are unnecessary, he thought. And I guess he inspired himself a little bit from the gypsies, because he studied them. I forgot exactly. He did some kind of a project. He was fascinated by the gypsies. And it's true, the gypsies resist, you know, the conventions and the conformisms and the predictability of bourgeois life. Anyway, some images, because he did a lot, not just drawings, but also models. You see everywhere the ladder. Of course, the ladder, again, it's a symbol and the reality of this continuous movement, you know, specifically a vertical movement, you know. But there is also a ladder is usually diagonal. So as I keep saying, almost obsessively, or the diagonal is the line of life, is dynamic, and it brings with it change. And Yeah, you know, this project vast because he did a huge amount of works, you know, drawings, sketches, diagrams, models, was very appreciated by some people, and there were very important exhibitions dedicated to this activity, to this project, which he abandoned in the 70s, I think, after just like you know, that psychoanalyst suggested, you know, after you struggle for 15, I don't know, almost 20 years trying to change the world, and you see the world doesn't change, then disappointed, you begin to do something else. But he left something behind, and this is the New Babylon. Now, it's interesting that it's called the New Babylon. Some people relate to the Bible, to the Babylon in the Bible, which was the city of sin. And I'm not very sure why the New Babylon was supposed to be exempt from sin. It was supposed to say goodbye to sin. This is something that is not very clear to me, because I do not know exactly why he accepted this naming of this project. But I think again that it was about an aspiration. It was about a new beginning in a way, and the Babylon was, you know, one of the Ur cities, the primordial cities, the quintessential, the paradigmatic, city. But here we are dealing with a very modern city, you know, where again the robots were supposed to work and human beings were supposed to play creatively. Now, thank you. I keep going on. You know, I wonder, because I did write this text, you know, the Babylon Redux, where I thought of paying homage to him by bringing his idea into the old Babylon and challenge the ruins of that place with his vision. I don't know, the pandemic changes things, the climate change changes things, so maybe, I don't know. I wrote this text before the pandemic, and the pandemic does change some things, perhaps. I don't know. Anyway.
Dan, what's the title of those two projects, those last two slides you showed?
Pardon?
What is the title of those last two projects? If you go,
this one?
This slide and the slide before?
I'm sorry, Bruce, I do not know.
Oh, they're beautiful. Yeah, can you hold on this one? It's very nice.
It's excellent, and I will send you that huge, not huge, but big PDF that was sent to me from Utrecht. There you can find a lot of information. But unfortunately, it's in Dutch, but many images. Yeah, he was a visionary. I mean, you know, in the 50s, 60s, he was. He also influenced Archigram, of course, and I mean, he was very influential for some time. But he renounced this project after, I think, 15, almost 20 years. He dedicated to this attempt to envision not just another city, but another kind of life. So I wonder, when I look at this picture, what if we see something similar in the proximity of Isis Gate and the Tower of Babel and Gardens of the Babylon? Because that's what the old Babylon was about. And so what if we try to connect, you know, visions similar to the ones, you know, initiated by Constant at the very beginning of, in a way, civilization. We are talking about, you know, the Tower of Babel. We are talking about the Gardens of Eden. So I think it could be very interesting to imagine what architects today would have something to say about that Babylon, but looking forward, no, not in a nostalgic way, like maybe Saddam Hussein tried, because he did try to rebuild the Babylon, but he was not real. Although sometimes he commissioned interesting architects, but he also had a regressive side. And I think there in the Babylon, he didn't allow himself to be too creative. But I think this would be a great challenge. Just imagine to do a visionary project there in a place which is also so important in the Bible and which is now ruined, but some of its urban symbols are still very much present in our imagination. So when I look at this picture and I try to imagine how I could, marry this kind of, architectonic vision with that very, very remote and also very, very prestigious past, I think the challenge could be very, very interesting. But again, I needed help. I think could be a very, very interesting competition. Unfortunately, Fondation Constant, as I said, decided not to sustain me because they were afraid they would be accused of cultural colonialism. I don't know if that was exactly the reason, but initially they loved the idea.
Dan?
Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just kind of wondering that what was his vision of the human beings who would live in this his visionary Babylon? I mean by that is that the physics of the human beings, was he thinking of exactly the same as we are, or was he thinking of people who had, many hands and probably 5 heads, and what sort of person was he envisaging?
Let's not become fantasies here. No, I mean, we wouldn't change physically. He only thought that in the future, from the time when he was thinking about this, human beings will not be forced to labor because machines will do most of the work. And so we will be free to truly realize our human potential in terms of creativity and be playful and wander from place to place and not be pinned down, by a job, a fixed job, or a family and so on. So he imagined that the future would belong to some kind of wandering modern human being who would, construct his ambience or his environment spontaneously together with other people in other nomads, in fact, and that the world will be some kind of a paradise in movement supported by technology that was to do all the work. And so, I guess he hated the typical life where you get up at 8 to go to work at 9, and from the 9 to 5 job. And although he had a family and he had children, but artists are paradoxically many times. And I think he was a great family man and a great dad and so on. And I intentionally use the word dad and not the word father. So, but who knows, maybe a side of him wanted a certain kind of freedom or the most freedom that one could achieve. You can tell from this very image that he wanted an architecture that was in the process of becoming, that was not fixed, that was not determined, that it was open and improvisation. It was a kind of improvisation. Somehow in this spirit, I showed to some students, and I could show at other times. Somebody's raising the hand here, and I don't know how to. I refer to Amereida in Chile, an experiment. Let me see how I do this. I guess I have to stop the share. Okay, and here is someone who wants to say something. Yes, yes, please. Please be kind and talk to us. Do I have to stop the share screen?
Yes, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, it's okay.
Unpolitely, so I raised the hand.
No.
Okay, so I'm a little confused about all this subject because I don't know what was in the mind of this artist, Dutch artist, but it's very clear that the Babylon Tower, it was a symbol. It was a symbol, and I think it's a mistake to use it as another symbol. So the symbol of Tower of Babylon, it was the selfishness of the man. So the man, man in general, in plural, it's a plural, man wanted to raise a tower to the sky. During our days, we see that we are living in Babylon, because in every city in the world, you can see the skyscrapers, which are a Tower of Babylon, each of them. We know that this tower from Abu Dhabi or something like that, which is about 1 kilometer length, height. This is the Tower of Babylon. On my knowledge, the Tower of Babylon doesn't signify the liberty.
But I'm sorry, it means all my talk was useless, because I never said that he connected his project with the tower, and not of Babylon, but of Babel. I think.
Okay, so now I understand. It's not about the Tower of Babylon, but it's a Babylon as a city.
Well, first of all, there is no such thing as the Tower of Babylon. There is the Tower of Babel, not of Babylon.
But no, it's the Tower of Babylon. So
no, it's the Tower of Babel.
It was translated as Babel, but Babel means Babylon. It's very clear in the Bible. But if we are referring to the Babylon as a city, it was in those times. It was the single city. Practically all the population of the world, they were there. So I don't know if this is the first of the cities in the world. It seems that there were around 1 million people already in the beginning. Where is the link with the liberty? This is what.
No, again, it means I talk for nothing. Unless you were here from you were not from the very beginning. Sorry. I said clearly he had nothing to do with the Tower of, you call it the Babel or the Babylon, it doesn't matter. He proposed a new Babylon, but not connected with the old tower in the Bible. No, he didn't refer to that at all. He just, well, the name itself, of course, could make one wonder, but he didn't connect with the Tower of Babel or the Babylon at all. My idea was to bring his ideas in that place where actually this first city, if it was the first city, began, and to try to connect kind of like a new beginning with that ending, with that because it was destroyed, as we know. The Babylon was destroyed by the will of the God, says the Bible. But on the other hand, I read that there are people and even organizations that think that actually a new Babylon will come into life, and that the Bible actually even says this. If you search on the web, you can find very interesting assumptions that some way, I'm not, I never was a good reader of the Bible. I tried, so I should be discreet about it. But what I read is that some fragments in the Bible at least obliquely refer that the Babylon will be rebuilt, although there are apparently other parts which says this is it. The Babylon will never come into life again. But it came into life again through Constant, indirectly, and he actually intended his project to manifest itself not in Iraq, but all over the world, as you said, in a way, although I wouldn't go so far to say that every tall building is a Tower of Babel, because the symbolism of the Tower of Babel was connected with the inability of human beings to communicate with each other. And I think it's a little bit forcing the issue to claim that we don't understand each other, so we just, first of all, the Tower of Babel was never finished, while there are so many skyscrapers all over the world which are finished. So
Dan, could I interject, please?
Sure.
Because I don't think Constant even named it New Babylon. I think that came from.
I said it wasn't him.
Yeah, I don't even think he came up with that name. And it's about a post-revolutionary society. No work, no labor, no exploitation.
No,
all the production,
this is
everything happens underground. And maybe it's just another interesting direction is to talk about his work, the New Babylon work, in terms of it being sort of an anti-architecture. And it's sort of, it's rebelling against architecture itself.
Implicitly, yes, of course, because, he was against anything that was stable, that was fixed, that was, conforming to anything, statics or whatever. Yeah, in a way, yes, but paradoxically, his language was kind of architectonic. And he even has a whole series of images or drawings called architectural labyrinths. Or labyrinthic architectures.
I think one of the things you see is that there's the sense from the group, at least in the phase of Constant when he was doing this work with the Situationists, where they felt that architecture was very subversive and repressive, and that everybody could make something. And so when you look at some of these images, there's all these partitions and ladders and things, and it's like you get the sense that everyone can construct their own space. Yes. And in that sense, everyone is an architect.
Yes, yes, it is so. But he still used, ladders, columns, beams, floors. I mean. It's paradoxical in a way, because you are right. And I could even recommend or suggest to you a book that agitated me very much, which is called Against Architecture. And it was published by Denis Hollier. He wrote it about the writings of Georges Bataille. I saw him lecturing at Columbia some years ago, and the title itself agitated me. Of course, in a sense, yes, you could say Constant was against architecture, but sometimes, when you are against something, there is a level of cooperation almost. I mean, not, how do you call it? Not conspiracy, not cooperation, but I'm too tired to remember. Is that almost cooperation between the victim and the executioner. You have, they imply each other, and yeah. But why?
May I just ask a question? Is that what you say, that he's probably against architecture? So within that context, what is he actually doing? Is he kind of social engineering? Or is he beginning the deconstruction as a whole? The structures that he's kind of proposing are quite special. So he's obviously thinking about people playing, occupying, or having activities within those kind of spaces. In what form or shape, I don't know. It depends on how, and it is still a question for me, that what form did he imagine the human being of the future who would be able to kind of happily live and play within the structures that he is proposing. So yes, if he's against architecture, that it could well be, what is he doing?
What is he what?
What is he then doing? If he's not doing architecture, if he's against architecture, and therefore is he doing architecture by proposing these kind of structures, or you know, where is he taking the world of architecture? If he's against it, then why is he designing? Why is he creating something else, which is more, to me, looks more, you know, social engineering, a new utopia?
Well, yeah, there is, of course, there is a utopian side to what he did, of course, but you know, the problem with architects often is that in the name of the rigors that are necessary in order to build, and you know, the way you are trained, it's hard for you to imagine something like this, something in the process of becoming. Actually, I think Constant is about becoming, not being. So it's almost like telling a client, well, I can do you the house of becoming, but not the house of being. I can begin something for you, but it will never end probably. And you will be part of a process that
Sorry, I lost your voice.
Pardon?
I lost your voice. I lost the last bit you said.
Well, I am too tired to remember what I said, but
yeah, Dan,
it was about becoming.
Could I read something from a website? It's called Drawing Matter. It's by Mark Wigley.
Sure.
It'll just take a minute. So I think the story would be something like this. One could try to tell the story of these drawings from the perspective of architects. But already this is to speak as though architects are here and situationists are over there. When what's so fascinating is that for a certain moment in time, the situationist project, if we could speak of such a thing, would seem also to be an architecture project, which is almost a contradiction in terms. One point on this very diverse group of what we might call dissident surrealists, that is, people who are very much in the spirit of surrealism, but feel that its official representatives have reduced the revolutionary force of the unconscious to a kind of aesthetic game, agree is that architecture is the very agency of repressive authority. Not only are we ruthlessly exploited, but the very figure of this exploitation, the mirage by which we persuade ourselves that everything's fine when it's not, is the belief that there is such a thing as architecture. Any official city map then might be understood as a military document, which has built into it the infrastructure, if you will, of popular suppression. And this suppression includes not only the systems of surveillance and control, but also places like cafes where you believe yourself to be an incubated individual. The official map of the city is not a metaphor or an image or a reflection of power. It is power itself in operation. Subverting the map then is a political action. So there was this idea that a true revolution would be an architectural revolution, in the sense that what you had to revolt against was architecture. What was required then was a kind of self-assassinating architecture, an anti-architecture, an architecture that would resolve itself. Apologies for the long-winded reading, but
no, Bruce, it was a very necessary, I would say, intervention, and I think we can continue our discussion about it. Now, I have to say, with Mark Wigley, I have a little bit of a problem, because on one hand, it's very seductive what he says, but I'm not so sure he's not himself part of the power structure that he seems to rebel against. You know, we are dealing with someone who was the dean at Columbia for maybe 15 years or so, and if he was not there, he was a professor at Princeton, quite established and with a very solid pedestal underneath himself. So he was not that homeless creator, you know, in the structures, not that nomad that populates, you know, the structures, the suggested structures of Constant, but was a very established man. But I admire what he says, but it's just, I don't know, I'm a little bit tired of these prophets who are not living themselves what they're actually saying.
yeah, let me try another thing though, Dan. That was
Please.
just an example. I was trying not to be proselytizing because I don't fully grasp and understand it myself. But every square mile of New Babylon's surface represents an inexhaustible field of new and unknown situations, because nothing will remain and everything is constantly changing.
Right. So again, it is about becoming, is not about being, but the great task, the great difficulty is to marry becoming with being. That's why the paradox where, you know, Constant loved the gypsies and played the instrument just like the gypsies, and envisioned the New Babylon as some kind of, you know, for some kind of nomadic people, while he had a wife and 3 children, and probably lived very comfortably and very safely in a very fine European city. So, you know, we can talk about a certain contradiction here, but contradictions are life. So, you know, I'm not accusing anything. I'm just saying that I think these ideas are, I mean, I had them myself, and in a certain way, I kind of live even now to this moment, like the people he, you know, envisioned. But I also, to be honest with you, I have a longing for a family life, which once I had, but not any longer. And so it's the same problem with the tension between stable and unstable. Any kind of good work, doesn't matter, in writing, in music, in poetry, in architecture, in painting, create some kind of balance between stability and instability. If you have only stability, it's not good. If you have only instability, it's not good either. You have to be, I keep referring to the metaphor of the tree, which has the stable part, meaning the trunk and the branches, but in the spring, the leaves show up, and then the flowers, which are ephemeral and, you know, not too late, they fall to the ground. So there is a stable part and there is an unstable part. And Charles Baudelaire has a beautiful short text, which was kind of an homage to Franz Liszt. And I could gladly send it to all of you here, where he talks about this duality, that and if you don't realize this difficult conjunction between the opposites, you are very, very prone to failing, because again, and this even the philosophers thought so, the great task in life is to marry being with becoming. Now, I had the feeling that he was more concerned with becoming, with process, with processuality, with and you know, maybe that's why, in part at least, his you know, his work didn't come into fruition, but I think there is something very, very valuable in his ideas. And that's why I said, if we look at the ruins of the old Babylon, because there are still the gate of Isis, you know, some remnants maybe from the Tower of Babel, maybe some remnants from the Garden of Eden, which are as remnants and the way they were built, they are solid and fixed. And to come with the relativity and the movement and the becoming of his idea and connect with them. So you have the stable past with the unstable future, and to connect them. That's what I thought would be very interesting. But neither Mr. Wigley, to whom I sent the text, said anything, nor the people in the Netherlands. But we'll see. Maybe I'll do a project by myself, or I don't know. Anyway, what you read, Bruce, is very interesting. And in fact, I thought of opening up. There is a site where you can read, you know, other thoughts of Wigley. In fact, there is a whole text that he wrote.
Yeah, and Dan, there's an element of this where, you know, the emperor's new clothes, right? That people write about architecture and art, and who knows what they're saying, right? Sometimes. And I found here an interview of Constant, and maybe, you know, that's all we can know for sure, right? And he says that Situationist was about the creation of situations. We discussed other ways of living, and from there the discussion soon turned to living environments, and then it progressed to urban architecture. But I had already been studying the relationship between urban architecture and living environments. I also published on the subject, and so I was asked to cooperate on the magazine, The International Situationist. So, you know, maybe we're reading too much into it when we talk about anti-architecture.
Well, you know, there is this saying in the United States, or I don't know where I read it and where I've heard it, you know, we become what we hate. So sometimes the great lovers of architecture are exactly those who talk about anti-architecture, you know, or there is the saying, you know, when someone loves to hate. Well, there is between hate and love, there is a very, very, very thin separation. And sometimes hatred is actually love. So, you know, when one says, I'm going to work against architecture with all my force, I would suspect that someone is actually maybe in love with architecture. But there is something that, you know, I mean, he wants to destabilize maybe that very intensity of the love. I think he loved architecture, Constant. Otherwise, he would not have labored for so many years at architectural models. He tried to give physical expression to you know, an architectonic dream in a way, or aspiration. And you know, it's true. How do you marry the unconventionalities of gypsy life with you know, with the predictability and stability of architectonic, you know, entities? He wanted freedom, but I actually suspect that he was a beautiful family man, a great dad, a great husband, who had dreams of living in a very opposite way. And so he envisioned, but there is something else, and I'm glad I remembered. I read in Gaston Bachelard something very interesting, that the mollusk doesn't make the house its house to live in, but lives in order to make its house. So the house is at the end of its life. It's like the culmination, the expression of its life. And we don't be like that any longer. You know, we make quickly a house and we move in and we lay on the sofa and we watch TV. But that house does not express our biography, the specificities of our biography, the complexities, the longings, the trials and errors. No, in fact, I keep saying all the time, what does The Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright say about Mr. Kaufman? Nothing. What does Villa Savoye by Le Corbusier say about the Savoy family? Nothing. So in other words, the house doesn't say anything about the very people who live there, except that they commissioned those architects. But what if we be like the mollusk? And I think Constant kind of inferred something like that, where you are becoming, together with the structure you are erecting spontaneously, depending on the continuously changing needs and moods and so on. So I think he wanted an architecture that would be, a true expression of our lives. And most of the time it is not like that. The house says almost nothing about the inner turmoils, about doubts, about so many problems we all have. No, the house is there, stable, unchanging, and while we are going through who knows what. Yes, it's hard to build like this, but maybe in the Middle Ages, to an extent, people did so, because at least in the erection of the cathedral, that the cathedral was the end product of their lives. They emptied themselves of their lives for the becoming of the cathedral, but not their own house, which were irrelevant. Although maybe even their own houses, in a way. I think, in a strange way, his futurist visions, futurist not in the sense of the art movement, but in the sense of having avant-garde longings and images proposed. I think his avant-garde, his being tempted of envisioning a future was maybe an expression of his kind of I could call it the mollusk's dream, in a way. Like, yeah, as I said, that our buildings do not say anything about ourselves, really. They do not narrate. Our buildings do not narrate anything. There is not a narrative architecture. Or if it is narrating a little bit, is narrating about the life of the architect, but not of the people who live there. I don't know if I said anything really worth saying, because I am tired, but I'm glad we are having this discussion. And I think the very fact that we are stirred up to discuss shows that his ideas are still valid. Otherwise, we wouldn't talk. Yeah. What can we say? I mean, anyway, obviously I better be silent.
Shall we continue?
Pardon?
Shall we continue?
With the presentation, well, it's not much long. I have a presentation also on the situationists, because the idea of, I'm very interested in a situationist architecture. But yeah, if you want, let me continue. It's not soon will end, and then I can show some things about the COBRA movement, which was very, very interesting, and he was part of. And then we can continue with the discussion, because I think it is worthy. Okay, so I go to, do you see the, I don't know, do you see the PowerPoint? Hello?
No, we don't see anything.
Okay, thank you, because again, it confuses me with this thing that I have to unshare the screen, and then in order to be able to talk, although it shouldn't be. Now you see it, right?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. All right. So, well, I hope it works. Yeah. Well, this is part of the exhibition. We have so many exhibitions with this large work, but you can tell already he influenced. I mean, these models and the drawings, although they are concerned with becoming, at least on the left, you see a structure that is really livable. I mean, and in fact, we saw some, you know, I mean, something like this can be built and one can live in, and it's not so unconventional, really. And also what we see here in the front, you know, we see the skeleton, but the house or the building stands up, and you see, it is in the process of becoming. That's what it is. And other architects are concerned with becoming. And it's a great risk for architecture, but it's also a great chance, because when you are involved with becoming, you might not be able to finalize your work, and then the client cannot move in. It's okay. But his proposals do have a certain level of crystallization. Even here, you know, if you see. And what I see here, for example, makes me think of what Lebesgue advised or thought of. He said, why can't we build buildings without thinking about how we will live in them? We just build them without functions, and then after we build them, we step in and we learn how to live in them. And it's a possibility, of course, but we are not accustomed to act in this way in the world, you know, kind of like a painter who begins a painting without knowing where he will arrive. Well, here the architect Constant also, I think he imagines an architecture that is at first just an unclear sketch, or no, it's not an architecture that knows exactly where the target is, where he wants to arrive, the architect. No, it's open. It's anything can happen. It's accidental. It's even some kind of chance architecture. But some images are, you know, they are feasible. You know, I mean, even this, you know, it can be built just as he suggested here, and it's more than a suggestion. But these are architectonic organisms that, again, try to become, or to move towards some kind of crystallization. I would call them actually, as I call some of my own exercises, pre-architectures. Yes, I think they are pre-architectures. They are not yet architectures, or they could be called not yet architectures. I like this word. I've been searching for images. I found this word related to his work, the flux situations. There was an art movement called Fluxus, or Fluxus, and then of course the situationists. And I would be glad to, I have to search a little bit for it, because I have a PowerPoint presentation about the situationist movement. And he was involved with the situationists, and the situationist architecture is very interesting indeed, although, as Bruce might say quite legitimately, it is in a way against architecture. You see, utopian and anti-capitalist city designed by artist architect Constant van Huys. Huys means house in Dutch. Okay, and here is the cover of the book, published actually by Fondation Constant, Stitching Constant, and they have a website. You can open it and access it. And they have many things there about this this artist. And this is you know, some kind of collage between an existing city and the suggested New Babylon, tentacularly superimposed on what preceded it. Yeah. Okay. Now, if you allow me, I will show you the short presentation about COBRA. And I like very much this art movement, considered the last avant-garde. And I do think we need the avant-garde, at least from time to time. No, not at least from time to time, but I think continuously. And actually, I think we need more than an avant-garde. I called it the peri-garde, because there is an avant-garde and there is an arrière-garde. But what about the peripheries, left and right, the sides? So what about the new word, in a way, peri-garde, which means you are always at the edge. You are always, you know, eccentric. You are always off, in a way, and at the limit. There is a word for this in English, but again, now I'm a total wreck, at least in this field. Anyway, COBRA. Now, COBRA, of course, is a snake, and is a snake that is very special because it's very present in many mythologies. And is considered almost divine. It has two eyes in the back, but they are just of a decorative nature. And I don't know a lot about this snake, but I like its name, and I read a little bit, and you'll see a few images. Now, this art movement was called COBRA not because of an explicit relationship with a snake, but because of the initials of the cities from where its members, 5 members, came, and will arrive at that. But I think they also liked the coincidence, in a way, that adding up the names of the cities, the initials of their cities, they arrive at COBRA. I think at least unconsciously they sympathized with the COBRA, which was considered and is considered a very wise snake, but also when irritated could become extremely dangerous. Ureus was called in ancient Egypt, and yes, those ancients lived, I think they had a much more complex life than we do in the level of at the imaginative level and the psychological level, because they believed in gods, they believed in another reality which was real for them, was not removed from their daily life, was part of it. So here you see the COBRA right on you know, on the forehead of the pharaoh, and I imagine somehow the COBRA artists, that's what they inferred, that somehow the avant-garde, this is what it does. It is a COBRA. They are dangerous because they tell the truth. Artists who are in the front line are dangerous because they have the courage to tell things that you know, the so-called you know, normal people or the bourgeois are reticent about, but not them. So that's why many times society hates them. But capitalism, besides its other successes, had this great idea to neutralize the avant-gardist by purchasing him. So this was really a magnificently efficient strategy. If someone pops up as a COBRA, meaning as an avant-garde artist, who is by definition almost, you know, I mean, is breaking new ground, is challenging the conventions, the conformity of an established structure is many times anti-authority. So the authority or those in power in capitalism said, okay, we'll caress the cat to death. So we make the avant-garde theater director, the director of the theater program at Columbia University. We'll give him a $150,000 salary per year, and the wild cat will become a domestic cat immediately. And that's exactly what happened. Today, for example, Jeannie Gang from Studio Gang told me the avant-garde today is in a unique position, that today the avant-garde architect can build. Yes, but with what price? It's true. Those who appear to be avant-garde, and maybe they were at one time, they were purchased with a lot of investment, so to speak, by those in power. And in this way, they were neutralized. So the deconstructivist, can you imagine? The deconstructivist built the European Central Bank, the headquarters of the European Central Bank. So God, again, it's not a complicity now. Yes, there is a complicity between the so-called avant-garde artists of today and the very structures he or she was supposed to fight against or problematize or question and so on. Because this was another great strategy that capitalism found to defend itself against those who might have criticized it. Anyway, yeah, the cobra is fascinating. Of course, you see it here even on the top of this god in Egypt. So yeah, and I think I have a hard time to believe that the cobra artists were not aware of the symbolism of this great snake. Because in a way, this is what the avant-garde does, or the avant-garde artist is that snake that points towards the future, meaning leads the way. Naga in the Hindu mythology, which is cobra. So we are dealing here with very serious faith systems that offered a special position to the cobra. But this kind of shared symbolic order we do not have these days. Now, this is how the cobra looks like from behind. It's almost like a face. Isn't it incredible, the work of nature? I mean, yes, it's a little bit frightening now, but this is, you say this is the head, the face of the snake, but it's actually the back. But it has, like, two eyes with eyebrows and all the rest, and looking at you with the back of its head. Why did nature consume its creativity to do things in this way? I mean, of course, its creativity is endless, but the complexity is incredible. Anyway, I saw that a short trip into the field of cobras, of the snakes, are. So you see here the front and the back of this miraculous snake. You can read, of course, you can find a lot of information about it on the web. But why is the snake associated with most of the Hindu gods? A question. We have someone with us who maybe can answer. I don't know if Vatsal his religion is Hindu or Buddhist, but if you feel like saying something, Vatsal, please be kind and do so.
Dan, I'm a Jain. Jain is a extended. It's like a different religion, but they like consider it an extended part of Hindu religion. Yes. I'm a Jain, and I think snakes, we also in Jainism, the gods have a snake as the protector of some gods. And I think even today in Ahmedabad, in the farmlands, you find snakes and people construct temples and worship them. So like snakes also help the farmers by eating away the rodents. So snakes are kind of worshipped even today. And
Yes,
yeah, that's about what I guess why they must be important.
but why do you think they are worshipped? Just because they eat up the rodents? So,
No, I think they are worshipped because they are feared. Like people fear that if they bite and you may lose the life. Uh, that could be one of the reasons.
yes, okay, thank you. But I also think, I mean, mythology is also concerned with not just practical matters. I understand that it's because of fear, you have a tendency to venerate what you are afraid of. But anyway, we can read about this on the web. Thank you, Vatsal.
I also have an opinion.
Please.
I think they are important in religion because they are known for their reborn.
Of what? They are known for what?
They reborn.
So they are able to be reborn now.
Yes.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, I wish from that point of view I was a snake myself. I understand what you are saying. Anyway, but here we are dealing, we are supposed to talk about this art movement, the avant-garde art movement. This was just you know, a side presentation relating to the COBRA avant-garde movement. So COBRA, actually written as it is in parentheses, was a European avant-garde movement active from 1948 to 1951. The name was coined in 1948 by Christian d'Autremont from the initials of the members' home cities, Copenhagen, Brussels, and Amsterdam. So you have CO for Copenhagen, BR for Brussels or Brussels, and A for Amsterdam. And so these artists came from these three cities. COBRA was formed by Karel Appel, a painter, Constant Corneille, Christian d'Autremont, Asger Jorn, and Joseph Noiret on the 8th of November 1948 in the Café Notre Dame in Paris. Of course, you know, some of these avant-garde movements did start in a cafe, just like the Dada movement in Cabaret Voltaire. Formed with a unifying doctrine of complete freedom and color and form, as well as an antipathy towards surrealism, the artists also shared an interest in Marxism as well as modernism. Karel Appel, you'll see a few paintings, but they all wanted to start again like a child. And maybe that would be interesting too, also in architecture. How would you do an architecture where you start again like a child? The problem is that the schools of architecture do not allow you to do that in the name of so-called emancipation, but I think it's a loss, because I think if the child has an ingenuity and an imagination that could produce stunning things, although maybe sometimes, you know, so-called naive, but most schools, I think, destroy that innocence of the beginning, which the child has. So if the artist longed for the primitive, for the child, for the madman in a way, why is it that architecture, now I'm thinking of what Bruce said, that you see, architecture somehow, by its very nature, is uncomfortable to long for exactly what the other arts did. You know, no primitivism, no child or childishness, no madness, not the unconscious. So yeah, the architect is almost by definition the middleman, the one who makes compromises, the one who yeah, in the name of serving a client, is actually selling his soul often, and is serving authority, because the complicity between the power and the architect is well known. In fact, Philip Johnson even put it very clearly when he said architects are like, high-class whores, because they sell themselves for those who pay them. And how can you talk then about purity? How can you talk about social transformation? This kind of idealism that the artists still had. It's a problem, I think, with architecture. But this is the essence of architecture, to be in the middle, kind of in between. But there is a problem with this in-betweenness. It's very noble when you try to express the in-betweenness in non-ideological terms, but when you do it ideologically, it's a big problem. And I really think that an architecture that would try, for example, to connect with what these painters, these artists longed for, would be a very interesting architecture. Probably, though, difficult to build, because those in power would oppose it. I mean, like a painting, yes, you can hang this painting on a white wall. It's a painting, it's an accessory or an investment. But to make an architecture that is as, almost disturbing as this painting shows, I don't think too many people would be willing to pay for it, unless the mollusk is allowed to pay for the project. So you see the grimace of a child who just emerged from a terrible war. Because let's not forget, here we are dealing with European artists who just a few years earlier were frightened by the horrors of war. They are interesting works, and they are major artists. Now, Corneille, so the Dutch painter Corneille, born Guillaume Cornelis Beverloo, was a co-founder of the avant-garde COBRA movement and one of its driving forces. Corneille is considered to be one of the most important modern graphic artists of the previous century. As one of the pioneers of COBRA, he developed an entirely new poetic art of painting. The Dutch COBRA Museum from Amsterdam stated in the announcement after the artist's death in 2010. Corneille was a close friend of Karel Appel, and much like Appel, Corneille was also very interested in children's art and artistic experiments. His work was merging the art on the one side and the life itself on the other, in order to make a unifying fusion, a form of expression. Now, you see, the merging of art and life is always a complicated one. By the way of this, I think true art is not an escape from reality or from art, but actually an intensification of reality and life. So those who expect art to be some kind of escape from the real, I think misunderstand the very essence of art. That there is such an art which is an escape, but I think the best art is not a running away from, but a running towards the very essence of reality. Just as Picasso said that we attack, that he said, l'attaque c'est une fuite en avant. In other words, you attack the very thing that you are afraid of. So instead of attacking, instead of running away from reality, you actually attack it. You move towards it, the very source of your anxiety or your fear or discomfort. So what do we see here? We see animals, we see trees, we see everything that so-called civilization tried to suppress in the name of order. And of course, architecture was instrumental in this sense, yes, this art is kind of anti-architecture. And the dreamer Constant tried to bring architecture closer to this kind of rebelliousness where you try to restore, to redeem what was suppressed. Animal, plant, stone, and the child. Corneille, developing poetic, just a second, because I don't know why this popped up. I hate when this happens. Just a second, please. Okay. What is going on here? I don't understand why that thing popped up and now I cannot move this. Oh. Now, another member, sorry, there was a disturbance in the presentation. So we are still at Corneille, developing poetic art of painting. And now we arrive at Christian d'Autremont, creator of the group's name. He was the one who had that idea to create the COBRA, but he could have used Amsterdam first and not Copenhagen, so then it would not have been COBRA. So I think they kind of like the so-called coincidence. He was a more gentle, in a way, artist than the others. Constant now, and you've seen many, this was earlier work by Constant, and that's it. Sorry, I expected to be a little more ample, this material, but it was not. Anyway, it was just a provocation in a way to, if you are interested, to continue to investigate, because there is a lot of material on the web. If you have a little bit of patience, I could show you the presentation on the Situationists, but I have to find it. If I'm lucky, I'll just take at random. I have many little USB sticks, and if I'm lucky to be on this one, it would be nice, because it is very interesting, the Situationist movement. Let me just see, just a second. Computer.
Dan?
Yes.
The previous paintings you showed, they are a little similar to John Miro's paintings. John or John Miro.
Yeah, John, yes.
These paintings are pretty similar. I just I recall that, and I googled the paintings of John Miro. I don't know if you can see them. Probably they were contemporaries or something, and they influenced each other.
Yeah, well, Miro was not so anxious as these artists, but I guess I mean there are no monsters in the paintings of Miro, while here there are. The situation is it's not on this one. I was not lucky, but I keep searching. We can continue to talk if you want while I search for the Situationists, because I think Situationism and architecture is a very interesting subject. Exactly because it is kind of, you know, apparently against architecture, because it is it cultivates improvisation and spontaneity, you know, kind of like an ad hoc architecture. Situation is no, it's not on this one. I might not find it, but I know I had it. I did make a presentation once on Situationist architecture. If not, I can send it to most of you, because I mean I have your email addresses, and I know I will find it. But what do you think of the idea to create you know, of Babylon Redux, meaning to revitalize the old Babel with some suggestions coming from the new Babylon, meaning Constant's ideas, and not only his, of course. My belief is that we cannot resume, we cannot restrain ourselves at the level of, you know, just serving clients and not envisioning some kind of, you know, transformation of life and society. How come an artist like Constant had this desire, but we do not have it? Well, we do not have it because, as I said, the architect is a kind of, you know, as Philip Johnson said, you know, we are selling ourselves sometimes too easily. Why can't I find the, he's probably here. It happens to me. There are so many things that I look for, situationists and SI, but I probably don't see it. If one of you sees it, please let me know, because I do have it, but I don't know where. And I'm terribly organized. In fact, I'm disorganized. But I can show you, if not, I mean, there is here, actually, I don't think there is any of the students that I began a school, the other school of architecture. I could show you something, an experiment in Chile called Amereida, which is kind of in this spirit and is an incredible architecture that they built. I don't know of anything else so close in a way to the ideas of Constant, with the exception of the Situationists, but they didn't build anything. While these people in Chile, yeah, let me show you this, because I think you will be as stunned as I was when I discovered this incredible experiment, architectural experiment in Chile. And it even has a beautiful name, Amereida. Just a second, Amereida. But until I find it, and this one I will find very easily, just a second. I want to tell you that tomorrow I will talk about a great Russian modern architect, Konstantin Melnikov. Truly a very remarkable Russian architect. And then on the 23rd, it will be a long day with Raymond Abraham, Sir Richard Rogers, and so Richard Rogers and Arata Isozaki. No, it's not here, but I know where the Amereida is, and I think you will be very surprised to see what is done in Chile. And it continues to this day, although it started in the late 60s, the beginning of 70s. Okay, Amereida. So I'm lucky I found it. I mean, it's not really luck. I knew I had it, but come on, open, please. Okay. Although I have another one. Just a second. We can continue to talk, or maybe I should. I have another one, but I have two presentations on Amereida. Give me just a second. This one I showed to some students a few days ago, but I have another one that is better. Let me see if I find it here. Amereida. Yes, here they are, two Amereidas. So I guess, let me see if it's this one. So you do see the PowerPoint, right?
No.
You don't see it?
No.
It's incredible. And I don't know. I'm tired of this. Yeah, I think. Yeah. That's the one. Okay, just a second. I don't know what happens, because I mean, I know what happened. I turned off the share screen, and now I have to reactivate it. Okay, but I'm glad I found the Amereida I was looking for. Just a second, please. Really, they created the closest approximation to a situationist architecture, and to an architecture that is also very similar in a way to the ideas of Constant. But it was done in Chile, and what is, sometimes, please forgive me, I really am tired because I really struggled with Constant. Because I spend hours to send messages, to thousands of people, and most of the time uselessly. Not to speak about launching a competition. I don't want to dramatize the drama, but the drama is dramatic. So at least today it was, because I found out about his birthday just less than half a day ago. Okay, so you do see a blank black screen, right? You see now homage to Alberto Cruz Covarrubias, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So it was based on a book, Amereida, and a poet and an architect, and this is very interesting, created an alliance, and they started a city built by students, volunteers, and with financial support from the Catholic University in Santiago de Chile. So the Open City, founded in 1970, is a field of architectural artistic experimentation born of the need to have a space to develop the project of joining life, work, and study. Exactly like the COBRA, if you remember. They wanted to join life and art. Well, these people try to do the same thing. And in fact, I would say that Amereida, or the Open City, was some kind of a bridging between Constant's ideas, or the Situationist ideas, and Heidegger. And I will explain a little further why I think so. So in 1965, so just a few years after the COBRA movement ended, but about the same time when Constant was working on his New Babylon City, a group of architects, designers, poets, artists, and philosophers undertook an expedition through the South American continent from Cape Horn to the Santa Cruz Sierra in Bolivia. The group was moved by the vastness of the territory, which led them to develop a reflection on being American. It is from this fundamental experience, embodied through the poem of Amereida, or Eneid in American, that Ciudad Abierta, this means the open city, Ciudad Abierta, was born. A city that faces the Pacific Ocean and which collects the poetic gestures through interventions, actos, but also by spoken word. Subsequently, an agora, place to discuss, was built, followed by hospederias, places to live, public spaces, places to go, and the cemetery, the ultimate places for rest. Ciudad Abierta in Ritoque, Chile, a few kilometers north of Valparaiso, a group of architects, painters, sculptors, and poets created in 1971 a place where architecture leaves its mathematical and rational hegemony to be closer to nature again. A space of experimentation where poetry is needed as an act intended by the founder, Chilean architect Alberto Cruz, and the Argentinian poet Godofredo Yomi. The winding road stretches to Ritoque, name of the village near the Ciudad Abierta, along the Pacific coast from Valparaiso, and then moves away to cross a huge stretch of dunes. These people brought the avant-garde there near the ocean in the most convincing, genuine, authentic way, and it's very moving what they did. In this area of 270 hectares, where marine vegetation breaks the uniformity of the stretch of sand, one discovers surprising buildings of imagination closer to science fiction. Sandy paths lead to different constructions, facades shaped sails filled by the wind, like a spaceship that seems to have asked from a neighboring star. Wooden house whose roof recalls the ocean waves very close. Don't think the translation of this fragment is very good. Influenced by Mallarmé, Rimbaud, and André Breton surrealism, the founders, some of whom teach at the Catholic University of Valparaiso, wanted to enroll in the tradition of Le Corbusier and make architecture a way of being and thinking. You see, very, very interesting, just like Heidegger in his book, Building, Thinking, Dwelling. So you unite the act of dwelling with the act of thinking, with the act of building. And not they are not separated, but they are united, building, dwelling, and thinking. The Ciudad Abierta must be a laboratory, a cooperative of businesses without social or economic link, an area of freedom of expression and creation on leading architectures and sculptures that cannot be conducted elsewhere because of dependent rules, urban habits, or lack of political will, or simply because they were too bold. The audacity of the works is the result of the status of a philosophical and poetic spirit that reigned in this form of cooperative to make possible the vision, the imagination of each member. Each hospederia or hostel was built to house its architect, the sculptor or poet, performed without a plan, with otherwise succinct and thought by all. So again, there was no plan. These constructions, 15 at the time when this was written, are meant to be light and constantly changing, just like the structures proposed by Constant. Moreover, some scaffolding, this was the word I was trying to find, because everything that Constant imagined was in a way a giant scaffolding, remains and blends into the construction. So the process of becoming is present until the end in the configuration or the crystallization of the building. If one disassembles it to improve or revise the forms, the materials are recovered and used for other projects. A workshop helps prepare for this. So this is the ultimate sustainable architecture. One room called the music room served as an agora where people congregated without hierarchy, without power, without doctrine, just enough to organize and give birth to each of visions. So again, without hierarchy, without power, without doctrine. And I think Constant had something similar in his mind. Some courses of the Valparaiso University of Architecture were given there. Some unfinished sculptures made of wood, stone, or iron link the buildings together. Because of their respective isolation in this vast sea of space, they retain their character and poetry. Within the dunes, a cemetery or rather a work of art. There, among other members of the early days of Ciudad Abierta, lay Godofredo Yomi and his wife Ximena. And look at them, they are beautiful. They are pioneers, they are opening new vistas of being in the world. They are intellectuals, they are poets, they are architects, they are thinkers, and they are builders. And they are players, they play, so it's homo ludens, that very homo ludens so dear to Constant. And now you will begin to see some of the structures they built. This is one building. Can you imagine this was done, and you'll see it completed before deconstructivism. Here you see a picture. On the right is the architect founder, and maybe the one in the middle is the poet, I don't know. And here are the students, united by idealism, by the desire to invent themselves and to invent or reinvent the world. This is the architect, the founder. And for example, the Sala, the music hall, you saw this picture already. This is how the building was at the end, you know, built 50 years ago. spontaneously without a plan by these adventurers, these students in architecture and some other humanistic fields. Why did they build? Why did they build in this way? And I would reply, why not? I mean, why does it have to be architecture boring and with straight walls and only horizontals and verticals? Why not like this? They felt like doing it in this way, and they lived there. They you know, they were also the clients, so to speak. This was, to my knowledge, no one else in the world did what they did there. And you'll see how many buildings they built, and they are all different. It's an organism. It's almost an architectonic animal. Because when you live and work and study and think and draw and in the place where you live differently, you build differently. But most of the time in our modern world, we don't work like this. We live in London, but we send the plan for a building in Marseille, and the contractor from some other place builds it. Or so we are. It's strange. We don't build where we live and where we think and where we don't. Look at how many interesting details, you know, that if you did a project somewhere far away from this place, you would not have thought of something like this. Plus, you see here the virtues of a spontaneous kind of architecture, but it is not without coherence, and it's not uncrystallized. It is the configuration is. I mean, it is a house that functions. But look how much invention is here. And yes, indeed, you can see the process of building the building is part of the, if I can call it, the final image of the building. You see how the building was built. The becoming is still present. They built here kind of like that mollusk that I mentioned, which builds itself by living and by slowly building its house. Now there is, you can find many information. There was even a big exhibition in London a few years ago about Amereida, Casa de los Nombres. I mean, even the name is nice, you know, the Casa de los Nombres, the House of Numbers. Cubicula del Poeta. Cubicula del Poeta. Look at it. Yes, it is the Cubicula del Poeta. Not so much that car, but the house, maybe yes. Cubicula Locanda. I don't know what Locanda means, but you see, it's another house that is very different from the others. Galleria de la Puntilia. And Hospederia de la Alcoba. Yes, it is an improvised architecture, but I think it has freshness, it has purity, it doesn't pretend to be what it is not. And look at this one, it's very, very interesting. And I hope I have other images with it. This one you saw Hospederia de la Entrada. And what you see here, you see multiplicity in unity. You see the collectiveness of its builders or their builders, but you also have the intuition of each individual. So it's not just a collective, but there is also multiplicity of individuals who contributed to this work by living, working, thinking in the same place. I don't know what the function of this is, but probably they do have a certain function. I don't know, maybe to talk with the extraterrestrials. I don't know. I don't know. I think what they did was remarkable. And it's so modern in a way. I mean, this is a situationist architecture, really. Of course, they were lucky because the Catholic University helped them financially. You did need a little bit of money here, you know, to survive and to build. But you see what you get when you have a free community of people who are educated and sensitive and work together, because the act of learning is connected with the art of doing. So you have knowing and doing at the same time. You read a poem, then you go and contribute to the, the erection of a fragment of a house. Then you have discussion with others. It's really like the beginning of a new world. And that is, we will arrive at the structure later. Hospederia de la Puntilia, we already mentioned it, but here you see it in a larger picture. You see, there is a complexity, there is a viscerality, there is something exciting here because, yes, it seems improvised, but it's nothing wrong. It's kind of a, jazz architecture in a way. And there are also children there, so there is also the family, these young people also became fathers and mothers there, building this fantastic surrealist almost, settlement. Yes, when you unite vita contemplativa with vita activa, something miraculous happens. But in the common conditions of our society and our time, you cannot do this. You cannot just take off from the office and say, I'm going to stroll a little bit through the city to, to maybe get inspiration, or I don't know, lay on a bench in the park and read a poem. You cannot do this. But here you can. Look, there are books there. There are books in the very site, on the very site where they were building. And of course, the landscape is inspiring, because the immensity of the Pacific Ocean and the immensity of the sky. But what we see here is actually people don't need a lot in order to be happy. You have some good books, and you have an immense sky above you, and you have an immense ocean near you. I mean, not everybody can afford to be near such an ocean, but we all have in our proximity, an exciting nature, an inspiring nature. But we are consumed by the I almost said the madness of capitalism. Produce, produce, produce in order to consume, consume, consume. And you are never paid to think or to feel or to contemplate. Nobody is hiring you as a contemplator. You take the New York Times at the help wanted section, you'll never find, we are looking for a thinker. No way. Thinkers are useless. What do you mean you are a thinker? You contemplate, what do you mean? You are supposed to produce so we can eat up what you produce. Hospederia de la Rosa de los Vientos o las Celdas. I don't like that car, but anyway. And this is, although it is a sum of individual buildings, but you also have a sense of community, so it's not just like, Mr. Olgiati building his fortress, on a huge area of Portugal. Here you have a community of people, yes, with their own individualities, with their specific needs and dreams and so on, but living together, not turning their backs on each other. Hospederia de los Diseños. they even have a kitchen, you know, with the plates and the refrigerator and many ingredients there. You can see in the bottles, nicely organized. Sure, and even a table, and you know, so you know, if you are a nomad, as Mr. Constant wanted, you know, I'm absolutely sure that at one moment you get sick and tired of being a nomad, and you'd like a family, you like a table, you like a chair, you know, to sit with your family and eat together and so on. And then, yes, you want again to become a nomad. But that's what I'm saying. There is in all of us a desire for freedom, for instability, but also a desire for stability. They complement each other, just like an yin and yang. Hospederia del Confin, another structure, another house. Yes, improvisational architecture, spontaneous architecture, accidental architecture. Hospederia de Taller de Obras. This one is very interesting. You would say that it's, you know, this is from Mars or something. I mean, look at this, you know, and this was done, I don't know, 40 or 50 years ago. And just like in the drawings of Constant, you see the scaffolding is part of the house because it's still in the process of becoming. And there is sophistication, architectural sophistication. Look at the complexity of the joinery. It doesn't matter, certain things that are a little bit rusted, it's fine, the spirit is not rusted. And even this detail is not bad at all. I mean, a very interesting structure. And so what if the structure has a certain level of vulnerability or fragility? It's fine, its spirit is lasting, is enduring. Really, I find it very refreshing. I like it. And here maybe this opaque side is oriented towards the blowing wind, because when you live in a place, you know where the wind blows. But if you are far away, you know, most of the time architects don't even care about the winds. Well, that's problematic. Very interesting building. I wouldn't mind living in such a place. So okay, it's not entirely you know, closed off, but that's actually a virtue. And in that climate there, maybe it's not even necessary. Yes, you have to protect yourself against the wind, but it's not perhaps getting very cold, and it's a very interesting structure. Palacio, palace, you know, not bad. Yes, let's call it a palace. It's different than Versailles, of course, or Schönbrunn, but its spirit is not less noble, I would say. And here is the photographer, you know. Yes. Cementerio, the cemetery, itself a creation. It was like in the ancient times when the cemetery was part of the village, part of the town. You know, death was not removed, you know, away. So we want it. We want to be as far away as possible. No, was right there, you know, part of, and it's very noble, you know, in terms of architectonic expression. I mean, compared to the conventional cemeteries, here you have almost a work of art, or you know, land art. So death nourishes life in as much as life nourishes death. It's like an hourglass. I think Heidegger would have loved this place, and maybe even Constant, although since they like the Surrealists, and you know, Constant didn't really like them, but anyway. Look, modest, but I feel affection and reverence here for the one who died. You know, the way it is covered, and there are fresh flowers there. The act of remembrance. And this is what I try to do with these gatherings in the evenings. You know, it's about remembering. We remember now Constant. Yesterday we remembered, you know, someone else, and tomorrow someone else. Because I do think that if we place flowers metaphysically, meaning because it's an act of remembering, and in that way we connect with what preceded us, but also we connect with what might follow us. So I think this is very, very important, instead of living you know, separated and alone and miserably condemned to a solitude. If you feel connected with Constant and with Otto Wagner, and tomorrow with Melnikov and so on, I think, I don't know, for me at least, I can talk about myself, is I feel less alienated. Look, another grave, no stone, another tomb. It's done very with reverence. Calzada de las Aguas, you know, some kind of a park, but just compare this park with the banality and the frivolousness of many maybe so-called entertainment parks, or the so-called adventure parks. Well, when you live creatively, you don't need adventure parks to have a wheel that rotates with you until you lose your conscience. No, you don't need that, because the adventure is in the act of creation, is in the act of building creatively. And so you see, they created a small park here that is unique. Combines art, sculpture, and architecture, and landscape architecture, and gardening, but with ingenuity, and it's not meant to be, you know, sold, or, you know, it's not an object of commerce, because it was built by them for themselves. I don't know what Capilla is, maybe some kind of a pavilion. Mesa del Entracto. Yeah, they probably in the evenings here, they gather and they talk and they exchange ideas, just as we do on Zoom, but they did it physically in the so-called concrete or real world. Also, I don't know what it means. It's some kind of a, you know, excavation here, but it probably has a meaning and a function. It's interesting. And we are dealing here with real masonry. Masonry that is not hidden behind plaster or I don't know what. This is about dwelling in that Heideggerian sense. You are dwelling. In other words, you are living in a place and you are making room for yourself, just like the mollusk, which is building its own house. These people are building their houses while they are building themselves. So they are building themselves and they are building also their houses simultaneously. But this is very difficult to do if you are not with other people together, and if you are not living, I mean, dwelling, building, and thinking in the same place. Torres del Agua, they contemplate I don't know exactly in what sense is the Torre del Agua, the water tower or the tower of water. I don't know, maybe just to contemplate the ocean, or I like it too. It's sculptural, it's filigrammed, it's a good structure, and it's I would feel comfortable to ascend and to look at the ocean and maybe write a poem or feel in a certain way how unconventional they are compared to the way we live and work and build. Because, you know, the buildings we build in, we live in, are not built by ourselves, are built by other people who live who knows where. And so, and they didn't build them for us. So inevitably there are levels of alienation. But this kind of life, of course, it's difficult for most of us these days, if not all of us, with very rare exceptions like them. So this was a life, and for them, and is a life of continuous invention. And the adventure happens in the act of building and thinking and talking, debating with other people ideas and so on. I like this very much. It's also about playing, combining work with play. I mean, you see in the background the so-called real life. But which one is really more real? That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
Dan, thank you very much. I would just like to ask a question, if I may.
Please, of course. Just a second. Let me finish here what I have. I have to stop the share. So please.
Yes. What is the proximity of these kind of structures and buildings to each other? How far were they built from each other? Is
Well,
there
you
any...
saw actually. I don't know, 20 meters, 30 meters. I don't know. No, I mean, they're not too far away from each other. No.
Okay, so it is really a community that they've built.
Yes, of course.
The exciting thing about it is that, you know, is almost they're building a free-thinking kind of community, and open-mindedness is, which is kind of reflected in the body of the structure or the architecture, whatever I would kind of...
Of course, I mean, it is even called CIUDAD ABIERTA, the open city. And it's nice that you said this, because yes, it is an open city for people with open minds, free-spirited, yes.
It is, yes, and is extremely exciting. I mean, I'm sorry that in today's age, we don't have people doing the same things, kind of architects and the poets and the writers and, you know, the elites coming together and creating something new. That coming togetherness doesn't exist. That is quite a shame indeed.
Well, you are right. I mean, there were other experiments like Paolo Soleri's experiments in Arizona, but yeah, the kind of deterministic life imposed on us by capitalism and before by communism or socialism. I mean, most societies are built by ideologies that cultivate power and hierarchy. Here, there was no hierarchy. That's why you mentioned, you know, being free-spirited. They were equal. Yes, there were, you know, a few people who, you know, were the founders, but essentially there was no power struggle, and there were no masters and there were no slaves. And yeah, it's an ideal, no? I mean, to have a community of intellectuals, artists, architects, poets, theologians, whatever, to have to work together and not just meet in an auditorium for 2 or 3 hours, but to actually live in one place and work together and live together, breathe the same air and read maybe some similar books and meet in the kitchen and in the evening sing together or dance, or of course it sounds in a way too good to be true. And they had this great chains that they were supported financially, at least in part by uh, by the Catholic University. Although maybe they contributed themselves individually, I don't know how they financed themselves. But the buildings didn't cost much because these buildings were, done many with the, found materials. So it is really a very sustainable architecture. But again, it's a different kind of life. And this is what Constant wanted to. He didn't just want to do a new city, like with a new image and that's it. It was not really about aesthetics. It was about a new way of life, a different kind of living, a different kind of life. And these people in Chile did that really. And it continues to this day. This didn't stop. It is still on. And yeah, the founders died, but other people continue their work. So it is going on, and I'm actually very curious what happened, in the past 2 or 3 years, because I don't know. I made this PowerPoint presentation about 2 or 3 years ago. Yes, very, very interesting, I think. And maybe we should think about possible ways to get inspired by such an experiment. I mean, again, because David is here, and I'm thinking of the fortress of solitude that Valerio Giatti built for himself. What a difference, That man built a giant, architectonic grave for himself, where he turned his back on everybody, really. While here you have a group of people working together and expressing themselves, yes, with humble materials, yes, there are no big investments or big statements, but I don't know, for me, I think the great challenge in life is to remain true to your own self, but also to be able to connect with others. And if you have such a community with people with approximately the same interests, all for the better. Really a very, very interesting social experiment, not just artistic. And I think this was possible also because an architect cooperated with a poet. And I'm not talking just about those 2 people, the founders, the Argentinian poet who is buried there and the Chilean architect. No, I think in the very essence of this community, there was the simultaneous presence of what is called the physics of architecture and the metaphysics of architecture. So you had the poet, the metaphysician, and you had the doer, the architect, and they were together, and maybe at times they were both physicists and if we can call them so, and metaphysicists or metaphysicians, and no, but the word in English physician means to something else, a doctor. But you understand, because they try to unite the act of knowing with the act of doing. And this we don't do. When you go to the office, nobody's asking you about knowing in a very abstract and metaphysical sense. No, of course, you have to know regulations, have to know how to use AutoCAD, but nobody's asking you to express your cosmogonic ideals or, I don't know, your philosophy or your poetical intuitions or impulses. No. So they had these chains, and I think they were not alienated. And I actually think we are alienated in good measure. Yeah. Anyway, maybe we can talk more about this some other time, but I think it's very interesting, both what Constant envisioned and what these people built, because I think it is possible to imagine other ways of life. not just the one that capitalism says, that's it, that this is it. We cannot envision anything else. I doubt it. There are other ways of being in the world. We just have to use our imagination and to, act upon it. But it's hard, yes, because you have to make a living, so to speak. And by so-called making a living, you actually many times betraying life. You earn a living, but you don't earn your life. These people earn their lives. You might say they earned less a living because, they built those structures, but they were not commercial structures. I don't know. I mean, they didn't create a motel there to rent, or I don't know, to speculate financially. Anyway, what do you think about what you saw? I mean, Azar told us what she thought, but what about the others? David already knew this because I presented this before some time ago. Or I'm not sure he was there though. And I want to ask you something else. What do you think?
Sorry, Dan.
Please.
I remember the presentation that you did before about this.
Ah, you do. So you were, yes. So my memory is not totally absent. Thank you. But I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the possibility of an architecture which, like the art promoted by COBRA, for example, it finds inspiration in primitive art, in the scribbles of the child, in the unconscious, because I do think that could be a very interesting architecture. And but an architecture that is not so much obsessed with comfort, an architecture which springs from our whole being, and at times irrational, at times dark, at times childish, certainly imperfect, an imperfect architecture, but alive. Because I'm afraid much of the architecture we do is not alive. Really, it's maybe, somehow so-called perfect, but not really alive. This is what I feel. And when it appears to be alive, it's because it mimics some sculpturality or, some, I don't know, I mean, the deconstructivists try to, in a way, animate architecture through the, the disjunctions. But if you compare what they do with what these people did, you realize that many times this very expensive. In fact, I could compare the Fondation Louis Vuitton by Frank Gehry with what these people did. Fondation Cartier, yes, is a astonishing building in some parts, especially the top part, but probably this Amereida, during 50 years of existence, with many people living and working and building there, and of course eating and so on, they spent probably a fraction of what Fondation Cartier spent to build a monument by Frank Gehry, which is also the expression of a vanity in a way, while there is no vanity in this community, I think. So anyway.
Well, I think that it always depends on what kind of architecture you want to achieve. I think it's possible, but not for all things of architecture. What you refer, I think is correct. It can work for that, but it always depends what is the use and the finality that that you're going to give to that piece of architecture. Because if it is like this group of architects that were doing things in South America and so on. That works. But if it is for some more institutional kind of architectural or more formal one, I don't believe that will work. Again, it's always possible. There is no as well. There is no not a single like unique definition for art. There is no unique definition for architecture. It's I think it's one of the things that architects can never agree. It's the definition of architecture. So therefore, it's always possible if it goes to in the way that finds some principles that are common to all definitions of architecture. I would say that it can be called so architecture, but again, it depends on what you want to do. I believe that is always possible.
But there is